I can't remember ever seeing an NBA player taking that shot. So Amen Thompson has been back for about a month or so now, suffered another ankle injury, and the top line numbers are not amazing for him. Anything that stands out in those to you before we get into some of the film that I watched on him?
I mean, you don't love 48% true shooting. That is not something that you're looking for. And even though we know both Thompson twins are not the greatest shooters, you can kind of hope that they can get enough around the basket, get those transition things to get that at least to a passable number. You kind of function in a way like a big man. And he is a good passer, but the assist rate per 36, not fantastic either.
Yeah, 4.5. And looking at Seth's stats, 26% time of possession, which is not as much as you'd see from like a pure point guard. That might be more in the 30s. He'll usually bring the ball up when he's in the game, but he's also often playing with another guard, whether it's Van Vliet or Aaron Holiday. Doesn't play that much with Jalen Green necessarily. He's coming in with the bench group. 28% total usage per stats, and 9.7% of that are plays on which he's setting up a teammate for a shot. So, yeah, that 4.5 assists is not crazy per 36. That 9.7% playmaking usage, your average point guard is probably more in the 15% range there. But he's not really operating as like a primary pick and roll threat necessarily. A couple other interesting stats on him. Negative 4.4 offensive EPM. I mean, remember that true shooting is so bad. That's basically 10% below the league average. But he's neutral on defense, negative 0.3, essentially. The three-pointer has been awful. And he's 4.26. Hasn't made one off the dribble yet, which a few of them have been off the dribble. And the big thing I wanted to talk about here is whether we're seeing the flashes. A lot of rookie point guards have bad numbers, though a lot of these rookie point guards are younger than Amen Thompson is as well. This is age 21 season. He's shooting a little bit better on long twos. Like his floater game looks viable. Obviously the three is terrible. If you look at the long twos, he just shoots a very flat shot. Still a lot of inconsistencies in his release. When he misses, he'll miss short. He'll miss way off to the right. The floater game looks a little bit better. That's if he's going to play pick and roll, sure, teams are going to go under on him, but you can only go under so many times. Like he's going to need at least to be able to make some floaters. Finishing at the rim, good overall, but on contested finishes, 53%. That's below the league average, but for a guy driving to the basket the way he does and trying to finish there in the half court, like that's reasonably solid.
And even if he's older than the average rookie, he's still learning a lot of the craft. Like we see players like him get a lot better at that specific element in their third, fourth years.
Yeah, he also doesn't play all that much with Alperen Şengün. So he's not playing with the traditional pick and roll threat. Some of his best plays were finding Jeff Green out of pick and roll or a Spain pick and roll. Probably his best pass was one where he kind of just got the ball in an awkward position along the baseline and threw this absolute laser bounce pass right past Andre Drummond, who has pretty good hands actually defensively, to find Jeff Green on the opposite side of the lane for a layup. That was pretty good. So he definitely has some pretty good feel for passing in short areas on the interior. When he's off the ball, he just has no understanding of where to go. He'll try to cut some. He's getting a little bit better at that, but there are a lot of plays where he's kind of cutting into somebody, where he's just standing next to someone. He's not like, he doesn't understand, because he doesn't have the experience, how to play off the ball when you're a guy who can't shoot. And like one example was he gets the ball near the corner, looks to hand off, and then he just kind of retreats out to the top of the three-point line, where if he had just handed off and then rolled to the basket, he would have had a dunk. And he just doesn't think of that kind of stuff to do. He doesn't think to, if he's in the dunker spot, set a flare screen for a guy to get a corner three, for example. So he's going to need to work on that stuff, because he's not going to be a primary on-ball threat anytime soon. Defensively, steal rate is high, 2.1 per 36. And most of his steals come from just breaking on the ball quickly as a help defender when someone turns their back, or if there's a ball that gets slightly loose, or he's quickly double teaming the post, because he's just so quick out of the starting blocks that he's able to just get on top of the guy before the ball bounces back into his hand, essentially. Great defensive rebounder, 21% defensive rebound, gets a lot of contested ones. He should be able to push it up there in transition. But he just has a lot of ugly plays as well. Plays like bad misses, turnovers where he just doesn't really seem to have a plan necessarily. Some of his finishes could be pretty ugly. Like the one play that really stood out to me the most was he's coming downhill in the Boston game where they got completely blown out, and just decides to like take off 2 feet from almost the left elbow and shoot this floating lefty scoop shot that just only hit the backboard, where I was just like, that I can't remember ever seeing an NBA player taking that shot. So there have been some flashes. He's got 11 dunks on the year. That's basically a little over 10% of his shot attempts. He hasn't really like dunked on anybody yet, and he hasn't performed well enough where you're like, oh yeah, they should give him the ball more. At the end of the Detroit game, despite going up against his brother, he doesn't play in the second half. They barely eked that one out on the road. That was on Friday. So I'm a little bit concerned as of right now. And like, he hasn't looked quite as athletic to me as I was hoping, or as he did in that first summer league game. Maybe that's the 2 ankle injuries that he's had, trying to work his way back from those. But I've been disappointed in what I've seen from him so far on the offensive end. I think he's going to be a good defender for a long time. He can really pass. He can push in transition. I think he can do more as an on-ball guy than his brother can. But clearly the jump shot is a massive liability, bad enough that you kind of have to make the assumption that it's not going to really improve. And so I hope that he was a guy who, despite being a weird player with his ball handling, passing, athleticism, aggressiveness at his size, could be a difference maker. I haven't seen quite enough of the flashes yet, and too many ugly plays to make me feel like he's on that path. And this is someone who really was high on his upside, but he hasn't looked like that kind of an upside player in the early going.
It's a challenge. And I mean, there are still a lot of things to like about Amen Thompson. I mean, the energy that he plays with and intention at times can be really good. Like the idea that like kind of his basketball heart is in the right place. I think he plays hard. When he especially when he applies himself and runs the floor, like that stuff I think works really well. He's an incredible physical talent. Like those parts of it I think are right. But like the guy that I think about sometimes when I watch Amen is, can he make some of the, even if it's temporary, some of the adaptations that Markelle Fultz has? And like Markelle Fultz, much smaller human being, but has the, had a lot of the physical gifts and then lost a key element of his game, and has, Markelle Fultz is still not the player that we wanted him to be when he came into the league. And like you and I both thought he was the best player in that draft class. But he kind of understood, he's done a better job of understanding like how he can help offensively than Amen Thompson is doing so far. And considering how I thought that both Amen and Asar had unusually good feel for players, not necessarily their age, but like the relative to their competitors at Overtime Elite, can they apply those elements to their limited offensive games right now, while simultaneously, ideally, working to grow their offensive games so some of those limitations don't matter quite as much. Like that, I am very interested in where they started, and there are parts of it like, yes, they are the athletes that I thought they were, but it is also a reminder that unusual paths to success are sometimes unusual for a reason, and there are going to be players we track for a long time, and like you, I don't know quite what to make of it just yet.
Yeah, and you said, at least with respect to Amen, they're the athletes we thought they were. I think defensively that's been true. For Amen, I thought that we would see more just like crazy highlights from him early on than we have.